Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to recognize that we are on the Comox First Nations territory, and did want to read something sad news today that former Comox town councillor and freeman of the town, John Morenas, sadly passed away yesterday. John was an important part of our community for many years, serving as a volunteer with the Comox Fire Department, at the same time being a successful business owner. He was a five-term councillor, and in 2017 was named Freeman of the Town. We wish to pass on our condolences to John's family. And at this time, I'd like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge John and his contributions in making Comox the great place it is. Okay, thank you. And yeah, all the best to John's family. And first item is the adoption of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We'll move right into strategic priorities report for receipt.
Second.
And second, okay, thank you. And do we have any comments, questions on the strategic priorities report? Councillor McGowan.
I was just wondering where the chickens and urban or farming bylaw development is at.
Right. To the CIO, do we have an update on that?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a project that we're working on in conjunction with Courtney. We are still waiting for Courtney's staff to have capacity in order to move this forward in a substantive manner. So I'd say it's still in the planning phases to get moving forward. But we've taken note on one of the last items that was requested from council, which was to consider allowing greenhouses into front yards. But right now we are still waiting for Courtney to have the capacity to work with us on this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on for the open house for the climate crisis solutions. I think we were around November 2019, and then we bumped it based on kind of planning. And now I just see that it's listed as low priority, and we've kind of added some new items to the list. And I just am wondering how, I don't recall it becoming like low priority. So I'm wondering how those things get moved around, or in what, if that's a mayor, CAO, or staff kind of with resources, but I still think that's top priority with what we're seeing kind of with the storms and the surges and things like that. So I'm just wondering when climate mitigation adaptation would still be a priority.
So we'll let the CAO address that.
At one of the strategic planning meetings and then a following regular council meeting last year, we brought a report on the items within that department, and we had created a list of where we thought the priorities were, and council did review and adopt those priorities as is. So it's not to say things that can't change, but the way that ended up as the lower priority was through the report and decision of council.
Just a quick follow-up. So on the strategic priorities chart, they're kind of listed like 1 to 11, and it's still sitting at a 2 or 3, but I don't know if that's in like chronological order, but it's still kind of sitting as a priority, but it's listed as low in this actual detailed report. So I just can't tell exactly where it might sit with that.
Yeah, so the ordering in that strategic plan shouldn't be taken as, you know, the number one is the most important, and then when you go down, it's lower. I think probably historically it's been as items have been added, they just go onto the bottom of the list, so it doesn't indicate its priority. And then the identification of it being a low priority item would have been in the report that had come from our Director of Development Services and into council. So we can probably dig that report up for you again if you'd like to take a look.
Thank you. I can take a look for that. But so low priority still means it's on the list. It's just kind of not in the interim future.
That's correct. And I think one of the reasons it had been identified as a low priority, one was just in comparison with the other projects that were happening, and two was looking for COVID to come to an end prior to doing an open house anyway. So.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on those? Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I'm just really quick ones. Do we have any update on a Mac Lang court date? and 2, the dog park update.
So we're still waiting to hear back from the Attorney General's office about the next meeting that's going to be set. I'll follow up tomorrow actually and find out if there's any movement on that. I would think by now everybody's back from their vacations and they should be looking at having those type of meetings scheduled. So I'll follow up with that tomorrow. Regarding the dog park, we have a building permit application that's come in from School District 71. As council knows, that entire property is theirs and we're going to be looking to use part of it for the dog park. They are going to likely be constructing a building on a portion of that land and they're getting into their development planning right now. So they expect that the building to be completed sometime late spring, and we are just waiting for those development plans to come in to find out where the footprint of the building is going to be, the paths that are going to need to be constructed, and whatever parking they're going to put in. So it looks like there's going to be a little bit of a delay on the dog park, but we're not sure how long of a delay until we find out what their servicing plans are and what the footprint of their building is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bissinger.
I guess just to follow up on what the CAO is saying, do we know what building they're putting on there or for what purpose?
Yes, it's going to be a small office building. I believe it's going to be a portable, but I'm not 100% sure about that part of it. But it's meant to provide space for administration for their international students program.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we move on to staff reports. We have a grant application under the FCM for Municipal Asset Management Program. Are you moving the 3 portions of that? Okay. The second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And so now we'll go on to another grant application, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Resilience Infrastructure Stream. Now this is for a sidewalk on the south side of Comox Ave between Rodello and Ellis Street. And further that, okay, and that the town of Comox will, okay, so we'll move that first. So seconder on that?
Second.
Okay, any questions on that? Councillor Swift?
Thank you. I'm just looking at this grant and I'm assuming that this would not include undergrounding the poles.
It's funny because the CIO and I were talking about those polls just before council. So maybe do we want to go and move and second the second part of this? Because I was thinking we would do it in 2 parts, but okay, so it has been moved in second for the whole thing. Okay, so CIO, go ahead with the undergrounding.
Maybe Shelley, can you make any comments on that?
The poles are not to go underground.
It's
Okay,
really
so-
expensive. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
It's
no, go ahead.
Isn't it, Shelley? I mean, could you give us a rough idea how much it would be to put those poles underground?
Probably close to $1 million.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
So maybe through the CAO to the director, one of my concerns about that project is similar to what we faced in front of Rob Road School, where the telephone poles are smack dab in the middle of the sidewalk. Are we going to prevent that from happening this time?
Yeah, yes, that was definitely a key. That's kind of one of my pet peeves, is having poles and sidewalks. The majority of our design is around that. You might have 1 or 2 that's basically on the outer boundary of just on the side of the pole on the inner side. So yeah, most of the design has incorporated that.
Okay, great. So that is on our awareness. Okay, and Councillor McKenna, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just maybe it's a question to staff as well. Is will there be any other traffic calming measures as we do that development of that sidewalk?
No, the only thing I can add is that the sidewalk will be put in. We'll be removing the on-street parking and putting in dedicated bike lanes. So the sidewalk and the dedicated bike lanes will narrow down the travel lane widths to, I think they're at 3.3 meter width. So right now they're much wider. So with that infrastructure in place, that should, has been proven that that type of infrastructure that you add into a roadway will have a benefit in decreasing speed.
Yeah, and a follow-up question. Will the traffic study be done in time that we can incorporate that into any type of development that we may do on Comox Avenue?
The traffic study is near complete. Basically the road cross section or design standards that we're looking at for reducing speed is to do the narrow, like the 6 meter wide streets that we're having in the bulb out parking we've been seeing on, we implemented on Forester, Weaver, and Silversmith. That's the only traffic calming measures that's recommended through the well, we've been proposing that on our draft bylaw studies as well for the cross section, and that's been incorporated into the traffic study. The recommendation from the traffic study was to review our traffic calming policy. So that is a few years old now. I think it was adopted in 2016, I want to say. So they say you should look at that every 5 years. So that was one recommendation that's coming from the study if you want to look at that.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just a great opportunity for us to reduce the speed of incoming vehicles into Comox town proper, you know?
Yeah, I don't believe from the information that we got, there's only 3 roads that were recognized as having speed on our within the town of Comox, and Comox Avenue wasn't one of them. That's with our current threshold. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is the standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's my own personal belief that even 50 through the town of Comox, if you go 50, you're probably going to hit somebody. You know, like it's a busy area of town that in my opinion should be reduced to 30, but it's my opinion only at this point.
Yeah. So
okay,
that's,
and we'll stick to the grant application that we have in front of us here. So. Any other questions regarding that? So all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So move on to the Northeast Comox Stormwater Management Plan implementation, and that the town prepare the implementation bylaws for council consideration based on option 3 as outlined in the staff report. Seconder? Okay. And do we have any questions on that? Councillor McKenna, then Bissinger.
Are we receiving a report from planning on this report? Like a verbal report on this?
I'm not aware, but there was a whole bunch of reading there that that we had. So CAO, did I see your finger on the button?
We hadn't planned to, but we could certainly do a verbal walkthrough of what this means if that's something council would like.
It's something I would like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe what we can do is, if everybody opens up their agenda to, I'm going to have to find the right page. So just give me a minute. Marvin, can you find the page that's got the map on it that has the 20 meter contour running through it? We should be live. Yeah. Oh.
It's on pages 4 and 5 of the report, but I don't know what that is in the agenda package.
Page 32. So if everybody wants to open up to page. Yeah. Okay, so what the Northeast Comox Stormwater Plan tries to do is ensure that there is going to, post-development, there's going to be the same level of stormwater flow leaving the property as there is right now. And so there's concerns that downstream, which is very high flood area, so it's flooded, you know, I think in the reports that we've read, they believe this was flooding long before human settlement and will continue to flood and get worse as climate change happens. So there's been a number of lawsuits downstream from that area, and the town has moved through in trying to open up Northeast Comox to development while ensuring that we don't end up getting sued for a nuisance by increasing the storm flows that will go down into that area. So previously we had worked, or the town and the regional district had looked at opportunities and different things that could change. One of the things that was identified in the downstream area from the regional district was just the sheer amount of money it was going to take to mitigate any flooding, and the fact that as climate change continued to happen, the flooding was going to continue to get worse and worse. So the recommendation to the regional district, which they haven't taken up, was actually to do a managed retreat of the area, which just basically means as land comes up and as people age out, not to allow settlement or development or use of that land anymore because of the long-term issues. So downstream, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an area that's below sea level at places and is going to regularly floods and is going to continue to flood and get worse. So the goal of the Northeast Comox Stormwater Management Plan was to ensure that we were not increasing the amount of stormwater flow at an event set at a 1 in 100 year event. So any rainfall event less than that 1 in 100 year storm, we should be able to, one, ensure that we're not putting stormwater or putting more water into the downstream area than would have gotten there anyway if there was no development, and two, have software and data tracking so that if we were ever to be sued for causing damage downstream, we could go to that data and say, no, we can show you and we can prove the fact that we haven't contributed to the losses that have happened. So that's kind of been the reason for what we're doing. Now, the way this is going to be done is through the construction of a number of dry detention ponds. So, if you want to get into a little more technical side, I'll probably ask Shelley to explain it, but you get large detention ponds that are going to hold the water during the storm. You've got an infiltration gallery that will help you manage the speed at which the water is going to go back into the storm system. And then you've got your software and machinery there to track the speed that it's actually leaving. So these ponds are what we're going to use in order to ensure that we're not increasing the amount of post-development flow. Well, where you are right now in this process is that there were a number of options on how we could move forward with this. So there was the ability to construct 1 or 2 large ponds that would service the entire area. The problem that we ran into with that is the amount of capital it was going to take. The cost was simply too high, one, for the developers to take on, because there wasn't a developer with enough money or enough of the land that they could justify that expense. And the other option would have been for the town to front end those costs and get it back through developers. And I understand that was probably a conversation council had and wasn't willing to take on that risk and try and get the money back. So where we are right now is allowing developers the flexibility to move forward and construct their own smaller ponds in order to move forward with development. So with council signaling your preference for option 3, which would have been done previously, we've actually seen land consolidation happen in that area. The reality is the cost of the construction of the pond is borne by the developers, and the cost of maintaining the pond is going to be borne by the people who have the property after development. And the less number of ponds there are, the lower the cost is going to be, 1, for construction, and 2, for maintenance as well. So there's a good incentive for people to work together to consolidate land, to construct a fewer number of larger ponds. And so that's what we're looking at right now, is the system providing the flexibility for developers to move through and construct, 1, at their own speed, and 2, the right size ponds for their development. Now, where this gets a little bit trickier is you can see on the map, you've got that thick orange line, and that orange line generally follows the 20-meter contour. So around that area on the right-hand side on the map, on the east side, it's lower. And so the water won't naturally drain into, won't end up in the Queen's Ditches, which is where it goes out into the ocean. So because that water can't get to where it needs to go under its own gravity power, that portion of the Northeast Comox cannot actually be serviced under the current plan that we have. So what we're looking at doing is opening up all the development to the west, and we're going to need to continue looking at how we can ensure the eastern portion of it can be opened up, and that's going to require consultation with the Comox Valley Regional District, as it's going to be, or it's going to require SRWs and working with the landowners and the CVRD to ensure that we can have the drainage paths needed for that area in order to get into the Queen's Ditch and ultimately get the stormwater out of the mainland. So I know that's a ton to take in. You've got the history, what we're trying to do, and then some of the struggles. So if I haven't been clear, if you have any other questions, please let me know.
No, that's a very helpful recap. Thank you.
Okay, then we had Councillor Bissinger, and then I saw Swift and Minions.
Sure, thank you. I guess I agree in principle with the option 3, and I appreciate all the work that staff has put together. I guess just reading through all the reports and the comments yesterday, there's definitely a lot of concern about the 1 in 100 storm being used and that 20-meter contour, basically making all those lands unusable or undevelopable. And just reading through the notes or through all the reports that were given from CVRD, it appears that McElhaney's been using a 1 in 10 storm event for the analysis of the Queen's Ditch flooding. So it just makes me wonder if we're going to be developing these lands for, you know, single family residential, maybe basement suites, maybe a couple townhouses, some pretty low density type housing. Is there not a compromise we can make with all these developers to do a 1 in 10 storm design for the ponds, so therefore reducing their footprint, reducing the slopes and whatnot, allowing more development, but then coming up with other, I guess, best management practices, such as using more of like the rain gardens, using more of the green roofs, and so on and so forth. It just seems like the 1 in 100, you know, it's not what McElhaney used for CVRD, so I understand like climate change and whatnot, but I would also be curious, you know, for the Aurora Labs pond, when we do have a crazy storm event, which I'm sure we've had, you know, 1 in 200 year storms recently, how does that pond perform? Does it even fill itself up? And then also same thing with like the ponds built by the base. Like from what I've seen, and mind you, I was on maternity leave all last year, so I haven't really driven down Knight Road on a storm event, but I'd be curious to know, like, are these ponds even reaching their capacity? And if not, then maybe there is, you know, some allowance that we can give there. And also knowing, you know, hydrological engineers tend to just beef up so many safety factors, from the runoff coefficients to, you know, the slopes or hydraulic gradients and all that stuff. So maybe we are over designing or forcing an over design on a system, even though climate change is in action and whatnot, but maybe there is some, you know, compromise we can make in order to allow development without necessarily making it cost prohibitive or impossible for these developers.
You sound like an engineer.
I'm back at work now too, so my brain is working a little bit.
CAO.
So one of the issues that we're looking at now is that the provincial government is increasing their concern around stormwater management, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that municipalities across the province have been losing stormwater management nuisance lawsuits, and it's becoming quite an expensive thing for people for municipalities to manage. So if we are going to attempt to discharge into the Queen's Ditch or through the Knight Road ditch into the Queen's Ditch, we are going to have to work with the provincial government to do anything less than a 1 in 100 standard. So they've actually increased the level that we need to meet in order to discharge into that area. So it might not be possible. We haven't had those discussions, but it might not be possible for us to design this to a less than 1 in 100 standard, 1 in 100 year standard at this point. The provincial government across BC is looking at the amount of damage that's happening from flooding, and in a number of cases are actually moving to a 1 in 200 year requirement for stormwater. Now that's in some of the more high importance areas, like when you're getting into highways and bridges and roads and things like that, but that's normally where those higher requirements start, and then they'll start to filter down into the other areas. So right now We're not sure if we could get into a less than 1 in 100 discharge rate, even if we wanted to. Now, when it comes to the other issues that you raised, we were not able to find other examples of practices in British Columbia where when you're dealing with stormwater, you allow the types of supplemental stormwater management, you know, when you're talking about the gardens and those different sorts of things, to require or allow the decrease in the size of the overall ponds. And that's largely for a couple of reasons. One, when you're designing the whole new system like this, it's not the same as when you have an already functioning system and you're looking at adding one property on, and you can more closely monitor that marginal impact with those other systems. So I think that's one of the reasons why we weren't able to find those examples across British Columbia. And as well, to get those factors built in across an entire subdivision on what house is going to have which garden, and getting that all built in and those calculations done prior, it's going to, you know, I think that would also increase the amount of design work and costs for the developers up front just to get to that point as well. So we weren't able to find, to sum up, I think your main questions on, can the town reduce to below a 1 in 100 year event? We would need permission from the provincial government, which they may or may not give. It's a new regulation that's come in much later than when we had started to envision the 1 in 100. So we'd have to start those conversations. And ultimately, let's say the province was willing to allow that to happen. It really just comes down to the risk appetite for council and what you want to set that to. I agree. I think that a lot of these have safety factors built in, but those safety factors are usually built in to protect the town. So it would really come down to the risk appetite council has. At the end of the day, if you move off of that 1 in 100, you are trading the cost of, you're trading the benefit of having a decreased cost of development for the developers with increased liability for the town, which is okay, right? Because, you know, we're doing that right now as well at the 1 in 100 instead of going to 1 in 200 or 1 in 1,000. It's finding that right balance so council can identify a different one. But right now, with stormwater management best practices, 1 in 100 is the number that is becoming the standard if it already could not be called the standard for these type of developments.
I guess, Jordan, just a follow-up then, if I may. Just like, so the Aurora Lab, like they've designed their pond to 1 in 100, like has there been any flow monitoring done since they've installed it? And like, have we tracked performance of that pond? Like, let's say, like you know, we've had some crazy rainstorms, like we've had more rain in the first 11 days of January than we historically do for the whole month of January. So for example, like, have we been able to track how that pond has performed? Like, has it overflowed or has it actually, you know, filled up? For all I know, I'm not sure. Like, is there any lessons learned that we can get from that?
So one of the things we did, we don't have the flow monitoring equipment installed in the Aurora Pond yet, so we don't have that portion in. I know we've had concerns around the pond because of the slope grading. I think that we actually had the sheet flow going into the pond. Shelley, do you have anything that you can add about the performance of the Aurora Pond so far?
Muted. Sorry, the only thing I can add, yes, we're still haven't taken that over yet, and so the monitoring equipment isn't there. The rains that we have been seeing in the last month or two have been crazy rains, and I think to make note of looking at the amount of precipitation that has been falling, we've probably only hit the 1 in 5. So we still have that probability is much, much higher for the amount of rain that we're going to see. So we thought we saw a lot of water, but there's still more to come. You know, that's what I'll just speak about the water that we're seeing in the current pond at Aurora is that we've probably only hit the 1 in 5 so far. And then the performance, a lot of the times it's still acting as an erosion and sediment control pond as well. So the inlet and outlet are controlled so that a lot of the settlement can happen as well. So you might be seeing water in there at a longer period of times than what it should be because it's still, again, acting as an erosion and sediment pond. I don't think I have anything further to add on that.
I know for myself, I drive by there a couple times a day, and when we had that rain, the water was right up to that rock kind of spillover area. It was inches away, so it was pretty full a few times there. So, Councillor Bissinger, if you're done with your follow-up, I will go to Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I noticed in the report that we're not scheduled to have the bylaws and so on in place until 2022. And I found that a little disappointing. I know it's understandable. We've had some big developments that have needed attention. But what I'm wondering about, is that realistic? And the reason I'm asking that is because we keep telling the public and developers dates. We've done it at least 3 times that I know of. And it just keeps getting pushed along. Now, I know we've had some issues with COVID and everything else, but is 2022 realistic?
Yeah, yes, I'd say that it is, but I'm going to put a caveat out there that it really does depend on the level of focus we're able to provide to Northeast Comox. So, funnily enough, as the developers have been talking to me about this and asking the same question, I've said, as long as we don't have things that come in and get prioritized over this, and I gave 2 examples of items that I thought may come, and I'll give those to council. And, just in the last 2 weeks, we've got indications that both of these are going to happen. So it'll really come down to some of the decisions that council's made. So one is the Providence project that's looking at constructing the dementia village. They're looking at getting their construction going and meeting some timelines in order to get funding from the provincial government that they're going to need priority processing for. So we expect them to be coming to council and asking for that priority processing in February. As well as the Destair project on Balmoral. They've got their grant application in, and if they're successful, we expect that they're going to be coming to council and asking for priority processing. We have the 695 Aspen project that was delayed for a little while. That's just about to get back going and is going to require our attention again. And that's going to be one that we won't be able to take our eye off. We're going to need to make sure that's all sewn up. So I believe that the timeline we've provided is achievable. I believe that timeline does have some padding in it so that if we do have to do some other things, we will still be okay. But we do expect that there's going to be a number of people coming to council over the next month or 2 months and asking for you guys to prioritize their projects over the other ones. And these projects are, what's going to get delayed are the bigger projects like Northeast Comox. And then we have the in-stream ones that council hears about as well, and and those smaller individual developments too that come and want to get that prioritization. So I believe that the timeline we have is definitely achievable, but the caveat is there may be some major community important or major projects with community importance that come to council and seek your direction for prioritization.
And if I could just do a follow-up, I know we were hoping with the hiring of our extra person that the planning department would be caught up by the end of 2020, and I'm wondering if that's the case.
Not with the new projects that are coming. So I think that where we have with the addition of the additional planning is it's helping us take care of some of the more regular applications that come in, some of the infill projects that are coming in. But, just since the last time we talked to council about when we thought we'd be cleared, we've had, the Providence come to us looking to move forward, Balmoral. We've got the Trade Winds building, the new apartment around the mall. And I'm sure that there's a couple other large ones that are just coming off the top of my head. So it's the list just keeps, as we knock one thing off the list, 2 is getting added right now. So something that we need to take a look at, not only in processing, but as well as what is our capacity, and is this the new normal for Comox to the point where we may need to seek more capacity in order to make through this backlog. Oh, and
Okay.
Sorry, and on top of that, once Northeast Comox opens up, I would imagine we're going to be looking at a number of developments there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Minions and then Councillor McKenna. Oh, Marvin, you had your hand up? So to the planner, did you, something to say?
Yes, I mean, our work plan was that we would be caught up on the major projects at the end of this, beginning of this year. So we have all of our major projects in stream. The last one, which is the Anderton townhouses, that will be coming forward to council next month. So those are all well in stream. And now what we are doing is picking up the smaller ones that have been backlogged. So are we on schedule in terms of our work plan? Yes. Have we now also had new projects that are also additional big projects coming in? Yes. And then the question is where that fits into the pipeline.
Okay, thank you. So we had Councillor Minions and then McKenna.
Yeah, I had a very similar question to Councillor Swift, but it looks like we've been going in the direction of this option 3 for the last, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. So if we go forward with the staff recommendation for implementing the bylaws, I'm just curious how long that process will take. Just reading through the letters, I know some of the expectations were very, very soon and probably not achievable, but how long would that take? And by going forward on that recommendation, we're obviously not making the final decision tonight. We're just saying we're ready to review the bylaws at that stage. So 2-part question.
Yeah, that's correct. So this isn't council's final decision. The bylaws will be coming back and you'll have opportunity to review those and amend them. I would say if there is a different direction council is considering, it would certainly be helpful to look at it and deal with it now. To construct the bylaws and all the technical aspects and how they intertwine with each other, bring them to council and have them changed at that time, which again is certainly you're right, and it's better to do it right than get it wrong, even if that change is done later. That would mean we would have to stop at that point and go back and rewrite the bylaws and make whatever changes. So if there are changes that council's envisioning, having that conversation start now is certainly preferable to having that conversation go later. And I think in the report, it outlines that we'd be looking to adopt the bylaws, which would allow development applications to come in for construction, hopefully in the 2022 season. So that would be, the bylaws would be implemented this year to allow for construction in the 2022 construction season, with the caveat that even at that point, once these are adopted and we need to get those development applications in stream, we're going to have those other major projects already coming with their applications in. And so council and staff are going to have to make decisions on how do we prioritize which ones move forward first. It's I just say it's a problem in the fact that we've got more than we can handle right now, but it just shows the development and the growth of this community, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. The number of major projects that we've seen come on our radar in the past couple of months is just it's quite outstanding.
Okay, before I pass it on to Councillor McKenna, I got to challenge you on that one with all due respect. This has not been just sitting here for the last couple of years. This has been here for many years. We brought in 2 planners in the last couple of years. This thing, I've gone out to the community. I've made promises because of past administration assurances that we would have this ready to go. Now I'm hearing hopefully next year. There's a lot of caveats happening. I think we really need to focus. I fully understand that we have a lot of challenges. We have unprecedented growth, but this has been going on a long time. And I think it's time that we do what's right with these developers. Either we tell them we can go ahead and get this done, or we shelve it altogether. We can't drag them through this any longer. There's been $500,000 of developer money put into this thing that they're looking for a way to get this money back. We have to be honest with them at some point, either planning, we have to tell them we can do it or we can't. So I'll go on to Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm with you, Mayor, on that exact sentiment. And so my question is around possibly the federal COVID transfer money that came to us. Is can we use that money to hire a professional planning service to manage the stormwater management plan so staff can focus on their other core work? And if not, what would it cost us to have an alternative planning service come in to do this work? And my last question would be, is there a way to defer the dollars so it doesn't hit the taxpayer if we needed to hire the necessary staff, whether we had to bulk up and hire staff to get these processes through the system so we can get it sped ahead? Can we use reserve funds? What can we do that's necessary to move this project forward?
So I would say that having a different person come in to construct the bylaws at this point would probably require more time than to just have our staff focus on it and do it for the amount of work that's been put in and the local conditions in getting this done. Having said that, looking at a temporary increase in planning services in order to help with some of the other applications that are coming in, or which may cause distractions or pulling away of focus from this, is something that we can certainly look at. And if council would like, I can look at that and look at including that in your budget this year. You know what, I think at this point, I'll take the comments that I've received from council to say that you'd like to see something like that coming into this year's budget for that temporary uplift. As far as using the COVID money, this probably would not qualify for any of the COVID funds. But also, I'm not sure how much of a net negative that position would be, because it would also increase the amount of revenue we have by processing the development applications and those sorts of things. So I will take what I've heard from council today on a couple of things. One, the importance that staff needs to give in focusing on this project in order to get it done. And two, the need to bring in some higher level resources in order to handle some of these projects that we're receiving right now.
Yeah, thank you, CAO. I know this is a tough one, and you inherited it, and you're doing a great job. And all of staff is doing a great job. I just want to reinforce that. But we have been dealing with this for a long time, so I do appreciate it, folks. Okay, any further questions on this? So we're just dealing with the first part of this one now, and so seeing no hands up, all in favor of that? Okay, any opposed? Okay, I see them all up. And then that the administration consider technical submissions which may alter the requirements such a slope that may be suited considering the needs contained within option 3.
Second.
Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, great, thank you. And moving on, correspondence. We have a letter regarding dogs off leash in town parks. CIO, you have a...
This just may be a good point to break for our public hearing, especially as our first one with this format, a few extra minutes to prepare for it, to make sure we get everything online properly would be great.
Do we just want to finish off this one? I think we're just going to move receipt of this one and let bylaw deal with it. Because
I would encourage council to have a little bit of a conversation on this, because staff is hoping to get a little bit of insight into council's direction on where you want this to go.
okay,
But it's council's decision whether or not you want to talk about this.
does council have a lot to say about this one, or are we happy with letting bylaw go? This is first I'm hearing that needs to be more discussion on this. Any Councillor Swift and then Minions?
I wouldn't mind just a very quick discussion, so not to drag it on, but just so we don't run up tight. There's been a couple comments from community members about this, so just a quick conversation after would be good.
Okay, so we'll hold tough then. So we'll hold off. We'll go recess, prepare for the public hearing for 6 o'clock, and then we'll take a few minutes after that to come back in and talk with this one, if that's okay with council.
That's good, because I'm dog tired anyway.
Okay, all right. Quit barking at me over there. Okay, so just stand by and
council, there's gonna you'll have a different Zoom meeting invite for the public hearing, so I'm gonna log out of this meeting, and Shelley, if you can resend that to council so they can log into the other, that'd be great.